Whilst in the 18th century Europe was facing with the Industrial Revolution, on the contrary, in Sicily, the production was still tied to the agri-food system, wine, citrus fruit, tuna fishing, and the subsequent canning production. It was tied to the mineral industries, salt and sulfur extraction, and the subsequent salt pans and mines, and at last to the crafts and manual work. Production methods were basically manual, sometimes using child labor, as testified by an extensive Verist literature. The social scenario was particularly defined by a split between rich and cultured classes on the one hand and poor classes on the other. This fracture brought the territory to that proverbial state of backwardness, the so-called Southern question, with which, compared to the rest of Italy, Sicily was presented at the time of the Italian unit. The unitary period forced the central Italian state to facilitate investments from the emerging business class in change of political support and control. They were both local bourgeois families, such as the Florios, and also foreign ones, such as the Inghams or the Whitakers, who in the middle 19th century settled in Sicily due to low cost of labor. These families improved the industrial craft manufacturing system, but basically they also understood the importance of new sectors, such as transports and press, which they shortly would have been able to control. The import-export activity of these families, both local and foreign, improved also cultural and economic development, so that at the end of the century, Palermo was able to host the national exhibition, visited also by foreign sovereigns and by Gustave Eiffel, who congratulated for the high level of progress of the exposed goods. On the other hand, the exhibition itself and the subsequent building expansion changed radically the face of the city. Economic interests began to be focused on the north of the town, an area full of gardens and suburban villas. The subsequent state policy did not facilitate this entrepreneurship, so that in a few decades, these families knew the decline. Many industries had to change their productions. Some other had to close, but the most of them had to change production methods, and as a consequence, the original buildings became insufficient and inadequate. Some decades later, especially during the years known as Sack of Palermo, many ancient buildings were destroyed or abandoned, whilst many bad quality other ones were built without a reasonable development master plan. To this must be added the phenomenon of illegal building, or the construction of buildings in context to the limits of legality and exceeding the bounds of common sense. This introduction is necessary to understand the consistence of the contemporary renovation of these abandoned buildings in order to collocate them into a more general analysis that has given origin to a virtuous path of revitalization for the island. First of all, it must be recognized that, whilst in the past the great Sicilian artists such as Renato Guttuso or Fausto Pirandello had to migrate to northern Italy to find successful opportunities, now a huge number of young artists who begin to know the market and critic interest choose as a challenge to remain in the island, finding there new artistic opportunities. The core of this presence finds interest in the opportunity of requalify existing abandoned buildings, creating original melting pots and the confluence of interest, as well as it assume new ethical, cultural, and semiotic meanings. The two lead events of this trend do not concern a single building, but an entire city, such as in the case of town of Gibellina and the large spread thematic park, Fiumara d'Arte. The first case dates back immediately after the earthquake that in 1968 destroyed the city of Gibellina, that was progressively rebuilt at 11 kilometers of distance. The mayor of the time, Ludovico Corrao, decided to call international artists and architects to give a new face to the city: Schifano, Pomodoro, Quaroni, Mendini, Consagra, and others. Thus, whilst the celebrated international artist Alberto Burri created the Gran Decreto, drowning the whole old country in a cracked concrete casting, probably the largest piece of land art in the world, the old Baglio di Stefano, a typical Sicilian fortified farm, was transformed in a multi-purpose building. The international artist Mimmo Paladino put his huge sculpture, Salt Mountain, creating a natural set for performances and visually linking the wildness of the territory to the building. The museum, founded in 1996, collects items coming from different regions facing the Mediterranean Sea. Starting from this melting pot of cultures, languages, and tales, Ghibellina is today one of the most interesting examples of contemporary cities of foundation. The second case, Fiumara d'Arte, started in 1986 when the Sicilian entrepreneur Antonio Presti left the family company and placed in a public abandoned land the Pietro Consagra's sculptures. The matter could not exist. After facing endless legal processes and having won them, Presti saved the work from the threatening of demolition, taking support in 1994 from a sentence that can be considered of historical significance. For the first time, a judge stated that the concept of art cannot be considered as a landscape damaging, as the concept of beauty is a metaphysical datum, hardly definable, and the presence of art could never damage landscape beauties. In the meanwhile, in 1991, Presti, who progressively put onto the land many other sculptures, giving origin to one of the broadest European land art park, started with another titanic project. He detected an old hotel structure, an eco-monster on the Sicilian south coast, and started to transform it into a sequence of artists' rooms: Mocchetti, Morgia, Sciaffa, Ruiz, Icaro, Ceroli, Pica, Dorazio, Cuticchio, Nagasawa, and many others local and international artists were progressively involved in this project, designing the hotel rooms. Subsequently, as in a chain reaction, art has seen more and more involved in restoring processes. Because of time constraint, a rapid sequence of samples will be quickly listed. Palazzo Branciforte, Bourbon's pawn shop, one of the largest buildings in Palermo, definitively transformed in a museum by Gaia Aulenti, and hosting today the archaeological collection of Banco di Sicilia at the ground floor, many contemporary works of art, a huge library, in addition to an ethnographic collection of Sicilian puppets placed today in the central hall of the pawn shop. Palazzo Riso, transformed into one of the headquarters of the Regional Museum of Contemporary Art. Palazzo Butera on the waterfront, bought by the art collector Massimo Valsecchi, refurbished and transformed in a container for events, the first of which, in 2018, has been the 12th European Biennale of Contemporary Art Manifesta. Another example is Cantieri Culturali alla Zisa, that since the end of the 19th century was the largest industrial district in Palermo. It was entirely occupied by Ducrot, the manufacturer of all the creation of the Sicilian Ernesto Basile, one of the most important Italian Art Nouveau architects, collaborator of the Florio family. The complex today hosts the French Cultural Center, the Goethe Institute, the National School of Cinematography, many workshops of the Academy of Fine Arts, the Vittorio De Seta Cinema, the Regional Film Library, and the festival Main Off for electronic music. Many other important events have been kept there, such as Manifesta 12, the Efebo d'Oro Award, and the ZAC Contemporary Arts Zone, a workshop space open to different artistic uses. Another example, along the river Oreto, in Eco Museo Mare Memoria Viva, a locomotive depot was used since 2004 as an art container for the local artistic event Calzart, whilst since 2014 it has been entrusted to the association that transformed it into a museum. Not to talk of ex stabilimento Florio of tuna fishing, the largest tuna fishery in Sicily, 20,000 square meters, working when the Florios were awarded at the exhibition of Palermo for the invention of the automatic cans opening system. The permanent exhibition includes documents, tools, and pictures relating to tuna fishing and processing. An archaeological exhibition is included. The area was the theater of many sea battles in the Punic Roman times. But the core of the exhibition is a section dedicated to the Florio family, whose epic lies again through a holographic reconstruction in which various characters and the reconstruction of the chamber of death of tuna fishing revive, giving their testimony recounting. The Undersalt Contemporary Art Museum in Petralia Sottana, in a partially abandoned area of an 80 kilometers long tunnels, where Italcali has recently created a space intended for the culture of salt. During 5 biennals from 2011 to 2019, 30 works carved in the salt have been installed. I conclude. As an effect, speaking of convergence of arts, a very relevant theoretic apparatus can be traced. In fact, the use of these buildings as art containers immediately offers 3 hypotheses to be demonstrated. The first one is about the power of the presence of art as a cultural legitimacy over the existence and the reuse of these buildings. It should be admitted that, most of the time, industrial buildings do not have particularly attractive aesthetic requirements, and their environmental remediation is often expensive and difficult. Thus, not only the artistic presence, but also the destination as art container increase the quality and the economic level of the building. The second one is about the possibility of finding in this Sicilian golden age a start moment for the validation and valuation of a particularly fruitful period that today can thus be considered as a phase to be protected and looked at with a certain archaeological attitude. The third one affirms the principle of the passage from art of industry to industry of art, according to new sociology studies over contemporary art and its collocation in the market. For this reason, it's even more necessary that an orderly and scientific study of these products and processes take place in a methodical and conscious way. Thank you very much for your attention.